You know those nights when you're lying in bed, scrolling endlessly through your phone, falling deeper into the weird corners of the internet? That's how it started for me. I stumbled upon a thread, dark web mystery boxes. People swore the items were cursed, creepy, or downright unexplainable. Some stories seemed fake, sure, but a few were so detailed they stuck with me. Against my better judgment, I became obsessed. I wasn't some thrill seeker or danger junkie, but life had been dull lately. Same routine, same job, same dead-end conversations with people I didn't care about. So, ordering a mystery box? It felt like injecting a little chaos into my predictable world. The process was shady from the start. I used Tor, paid in Bitcoin, and sent a message to a seller with a reputation for delivering the real deal. Their listing was bare bones. Mystery box, $350, no refunds, not responsible for consequences. The message I got back made my stomach drop. Your curiosity will be your undoing. It was dramatic, sure, but I chalked it up to marketing. The next message simply said, wait. Days passed, then a week. I started second-guessing the whole thing. Maybe I'd been scammed. But late one night, as I returned home from work, I found a package on my doorstep. No label, no return address. Just a plain brown box. My name was scrawled on it in shaky black ink, almost like it had been written by someone with trembling hands. I carried it inside, feeling the weight shift unnaturally as if whatever was inside had been packed without care, or was alive. I froze at the thought and gave the box a quick shake. No noise. Still, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I set the box on the table and stared at it for a long time, debating if I should even open it. But my curiosity had already gotten me this far. Grabbing a box cutter, I sliced through the tape, feeling the air around me grow heavy, almost suffocating. The first layer was crumpled newspapers, yellowed and brittle, like they were decades old. Beneath them were the items, each more bizarre than the last. The first thing I pulled out was a small, cracked mirror framed in tarnished silver. As I held it up, I noticed something strange. My reflection looked off. It wasn't delayed exactly, but my eyes in the mirror seemed to follow me just a little too closely. The next item was a child's drawing on lined paper. It showed a stick figure standing under a black sky filled with scribbled stars. The figure had no face, just a blank oval where its features should have been. Written in messy handwriting at the bottom was, "Do you see me now?" I set the drawing aside quickly, my hands shaking. I told myself it was just a coincidence, some creep's idea of a joke. But the next thing I pulled out made me question that. It was a doll. Not the kind you find in toy stores. This was handmade, stitched together from scraps of fabric. Its head was a burlap sack, its button eyes uneven, and its smile was drawn in thick red thread that looked too much like it had been sewn on hastily. As I inspected it closer, I noticed something wet staining the bottom of the doll's dress. Then there was a sound. It came from the box, faint but unmistakable. A soft scratching, like nails on wood. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. I had emptied almost everything from the box, except for one final item. It was a small black jewelry box, unmarked and smooth to the touch. I hesitated, but my hand moved toward it as if it had a will of its own. The scratching grew louder as I opened the lid. Inside was a key. It was old, rusted, and covered in some kind of dark residue. But that wasn't what scared me. Beneath the key was a Polaroid photo of my house, taken from the outside. The photo wasn't old. It showed my car in the driveway and the porch light I'd just turned on an hour ago. Someone had been here. I shot up, grabbing the curtains and peeking out the window. The street was empty, just the faint glow of streetlights. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Then my phone buzzed on the table. It was a text message from an unknown number. "Do you like your box?" I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. I typed back, "Who is this?" and hit send. A reply came almost instantly. "Look outside." My stomach dropped. I moved slowly to the window and pulled the curtain back just enough to see. Under the streetlight, a figure stood motionless, their face hidden under a hood. In their hand, they held something small and rectangular, another Polaroid camera. the flash went off, and that's when I knew I had made a terrible mistake. I stumbled backward from the window, heart hammering in my chest. The curtains swayed slightly as I let them fall back into place. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look, but some morbid part of me couldn't resist. "Nice house," the message read. Panic surged through me. I checked the locks on my door, front, back, and even the flimsy one on the sliding glass door that always seemed a little too loose. Everything was secure, but that didn't stop the suffocating dread settling in my chest. I grabbed my phone and dialed the police. As the call connected, I glanced back at the box on the table. The items sat there, each one radiating a sinister energy that now felt almost tangible. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice startled me, and I realized I didn't even know where to begin. Someone's outside my house, I stammered. They've been watching me. She asked for my address, and I gave it to her. As I described the figure I'd seen, I peeked out the window again, careful not to make any noise. The street was empty now. The figure was gone. "I don't see them anymore," I said, my voice shaking. But they were there. They took a picture of my house. The operator promised to send an officer to patrol the area, but her tone betrayed a lack of urgency. To her, I was probably just another paranoid caller. But this wasn't paranoia. This was real. After I hung up, I paced the room, trying to steady my breathing. That's when I noticed it. The Polaroid camera from the box was no longer on the table. I froze. My eyes darted around the room, but there was no sign of it. I was sure I hadn't moved it. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Sitting on the edge of the kitchen counter was a freshly printed Polaroid photo. It hadn't been there before. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The photo was of me, standing in front of the window, curtains drawn slightly back, looking outside. Someone had taken this picture moments ago. I felt a sharp pang of fear, like ice spreading through my veins. The photo was impossible. The only camera capable of taking it was the one from the box, and it was missing. A creak upstairs made me jump. My eyes shot to the ceiling. The sound wasn't loud, but it was enough to tell me I wasn't alone. I grabbed a kitchen knife, my grip slick with sweat, and crept toward the stairs. Each step groaned under my weight, and I cursed myself for not calling the police again. When I reached the top, I strained to hear anything. Breathing, movement, anything at all. But the house was silent. I checked the bedroom first. Empty. The bathroom was the same. Finally, I opened the door to the guest room, which I barely ever used. The window was wide open, the curtains billowing in the cold night air. On the floor, directly beneath the window, was the missing Polaroid camera. I approached it cautiously, half expecting someone to leap out of the shadows. When I picked it up, the smell hit me, an acrid mix of metal and decay. My stomach churned. The camera whirred to life in my hands, startling me so badly I nearly dropped it. A photo ejected from the slot, landing face down on the floor. I stared at it, terrified to see what it might show. Finally, I flipped it over. The picture was of my bedroom, taken from the corner of the room. It showed my bed, the closet, and the faint outline of someone standing just inside the doorway. I bolted back downstairs, my chest heaving. This was no prank. This wasn't some elaborate hoax. Someone was in my house, or had been. The operator sounded more concerned now. She told me to stay on the line and wait for the officers to arrive. But before I could reply, the call cut off. The screen of my phone went black. I tried turning it back on, but it wouldn't respond. I grabbed my laptop, desperate to contact someone, anyone. But as soon as I opened it, the screen flickered and displayed a single message in large, bold text. "Stop looking." The laptop shut itself off, and then I heard it, the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the basement. The footsteps echoed faintly, sending a shiver down my spine. My first instinct was to run, to grab my car keys and leave the house without looking back. But the thought of someone creeping around in my basement made my blood boil. Whoever was doing this had crossed a line, and I wasn't about to let them terrorize me any longer. Still clutching the kitchen knife, I tiptoed to the basement door. It was slightly ajar, a thin sliver of darkness visible through the gap. The air near the door felt colder, almost as if it were seeping out of the basement itself. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the light switch. Slowly, I pressed it. Nothing happened. The bulb had blown out, leaving the basement shrouded in complete darkness. I cursed under my breath, the silence pressing in around me. A faint rustling sound floated up from below, like someone shifting their weight on an old wooden floorboard. My grip on the knife tightened. "Who's down there?" I called out, my voice trembling, despite my efforts to sound brave. No response. Gathering what little courage I had left, I pushed the door open and descended the stairs, one agonizing step at a time. The wooden boards creaked loudly under my weight, each sound magnified in the oppressive silence. The air grew heavier with each step, thick with the scent of damp earth and something faintly metallic. At the bottom of the stairs, I fumbled for the string to the old pull chain light. When I finally found it and yanked, the dim bulb flickered to life, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. The basement was as I remembered it, cluttered with boxes, tools, and old furniture I'd been too lazy to throw out. But something was different. In the center of the room was a chair, its back facing me. On it sat an object covered by a dark cloth. My heart raced as I approached, every nerve in my body screaming at me to turn around and leave. But I had to know. I grabbed the edge of the cloth and yanked it away. Beneath it was a laptop, the screen glowing faintly. As I stared at the screen, lines of text began to appear, typed out as if by an invisible hand. "You were warned." Before I could react, the screen flickered, and a live video feed appeared. It took me a moment to process what I was seeing. The camera was showing the inside of my house, the living room, and then the view shifted to the kitchen, the stairs, and finally to me. I stared into the lens of a small hidden camera mounted in the corner of the basement ceiling. My own terrified face stared back at me. A sudden noise made me whip around, a loud metallic clatter from the far side of the room. I raised the knife, my heart pounding as I scanned the shadows. Something moved. A figure stepped out from behind the stacks of boxes, their face obscured by a hood. I sat on the floor, clutching my phone, unable to tear my eyes away from the photo. The hooded figure's presence in the background was unmistakable, their shadowy form barely illuminated by the faint basement light. This wasn't random. They were in my house, had been in my house, and they wanted me to know. I jumped as a loud knock came at the front door. My heart leapt into my throat. For a moment, I didn't move, too paralyzed to even breathe. Then the knock came again, more insistent this time. "Police!" a voice called out. Relief washed over me, though it was tempered by suspicion. I crept to the door and peered through the peephole. Two officers stood on my porch, one shining a flashlight into the yard while the other knocked again. I opened the door just enough to speak. "Thank God you're here," I said, my voice shaking. "Someone's in my house." They were just in the basement. The officer in front, a middle-aged man with a graying mustache, gave me a measured look. "We got your call. Mind if we take a look around?" I stepped aside, still clutching the knife, and let them in. The younger officer, a woman with a sharp gaze, noticed the knife immediately. "You might want to put that down," she said, her tone calm but firm. I hesitated before placing the knife on the counter. The officers moved through the house methodically, checking every room and closet. When they reached the basement, I couldn't bring myself to follow them down. Instead, I hovered near the door, straining to hear their movements. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged, their expressions unreadable. "There's no one here," the older officer said. I stared at him, disbelief and frustration bubbling up. "There was someone," I insisted. "They were in the basement. They left this." I handed him the Polaroid photo, my hands trembling. He studied it for a moment before exchanging a glance with his partner. "We'll file a report," he said finally, "but without more evidence, there's not much we can do right now." The camera panned slowly, revealing a wall covered in Polaroid photos. As the camera zoomed in, I realized with a jolt that the photos were of me, sitting on my couch, sleeping in my bed, standing in front of the window. The video ended abruptly, leaving me staring at the blank screen. My phone buzzed again. "You opened the box. That means you're part of this now." Part of what? My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about the box, it was about me, and they weren't going to stop. I grabbed the box from the table, desperate to find something, anything that could explain what was happening. I rummaged through the items again, my hands trembling. That's when I noticed the envelope. It had been tucked beneath the false bottom of the box, hidden so well I'd missed it the first time. I tore it open and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The message was scrawled in jagged, uneven handwriting. Do not destroy the box. Do not try to run. They're already inside. As I read the last line, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps upstairs. The footsteps upstairs were slow and deliberate, each one echoing like a warning through the house. My throat tightened as I clutched the paper in my hand, its cryptic message burning into my mind. They're already inside. I didn't dare move. My legs felt like lead, and my breathing came in shallow gasps. The thought of confronting whoever or whatever was up there made my skin crawl. But staying frozen in the basement felt just as dangerous. Another creak. Closer this time. I grabbed the knife from the counter and crept toward the staircase, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would give me away. The dim light from the basement bulb cast distorted shadows on the walls, making every corner seem alive. At the top of the stairs I paused, straining to hear. The footsteps had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that was somehow worse. Summoning every ounce of courage I had, I pushed the basement door open and stepped into the hallway. The house was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of the street lamp outside. I scanned the hallway, my eyes darting from the kitchen to the living room. Nothing seemed out of place. Then I heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible sound. Breathing. It was coming from the living room. My grip on the knife tightened as I moved toward the doorway, each step feeling like a mile. The living room was pitch black, the furniture casting strange, hulking shapes in the shadows. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice shaking. No response. I reached for the light switch, but before I could flip it, a figure moved in the corner of my eye. I spun around, raising the knife, but there was nothing there. The breathing grew louder, more ragged, and I realized with horror that it wasn't coming from the living room anymore. It was coming from directly behind me. I turned slowly, my pulse hammering in my ears. The hooded figure stood at the end of the hallway. It wasn't a perfect match. There was something off about the eyes, something unnatural about the way they glinted in the dim light. But it was unmistakably me. I staggered backward, my mind reeling. "This isn't real," I whispered, shaking my head. "You're not real." The doppelganger smiled, a cold, hollow expression that sent chills down my spine. Then in a voice that sounded just like mine, they said, "You should have left it alone." Before I could respond, the lights flickered violently, plunging the house into darkness. Panic set in as I fumbled for my phone, desperate for some kind of light. When the screen lit up, my heart stopped. The phone wasn't showing the flashlight app, it was showing a video. The feed was live, the camera angle focused on the kitchen. I could see myself standing there in the dark, staring at the screen. But I wasn't alone. Behind me, just barely visible in the glow of the phone, was the figure. I spun around, swinging the knife wildly, but there was nothing there. The phone buzzed in my hand, a new message appearing on the screen. "It's too late." The lights came back on, and the room was empty. The figure was gone, the oppressive silence replaced by the faint hum of the refrigerator. But I knew it wasn't over. I turned to the box on the table, my reflection staring back at me in its glossy black surface. It felt alive somehow, its presence filling the room like a ticking time bomb. I didn't know what would happen if I destroyed it, but I couldn't take the chance. Whatever had come into my life with the box, it wasn't going to leave willingly. As I stared at it, the phone buzzed again. This time, there was no message, just a timestamp. It was counting down. The countdown on my phone ticked down relentlessly, each second a deafening drumbeat in my ears. I stared at the screen, paralyzed by the stark reality of the dwindling numbers. Whatever was about to happen, it was coming fast. The house seemed different now, as if the walls were leaning in, suffocating me. Shadows moved in the corners of my vision, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. I turned back to the box on the table. It sat there, innocuous and immovable, its surface gleaming under the dim light. I couldn't keep running. Whatever nightmare this was, I had to face it. Gripping the knife, I took a deep breath and approached the box. My heart pounded as I reached out, my fingers trembling as they brushed against its cold, smooth surface. The box was heavier than I remembered as I lifted it, its weight pressing down on me like a physical manifestation of my fear. The countdown hit 001, then stopped. I braced myself, expecting some catastrophic event, a blinding flash, a deafening roar, something. But nothing happened. The silence was suffocating, and for a brief, foolish moment, I thought it was over. Then the box clicked open on its own. I staggered back as the lid lifted, revealing its contents. Inside, I was standing in my living room, the same living room I was in now. But something was wrong. The version of me in the photo wasn't holding a knife. It was holding the box. A chill ran down my spine as I looked closer. Behind the photo version of me, there was a figure. It was the same hooded figure from before, but its face was blurred, a swirling void of nothingness. The photo seemed alive, its edges curling and writhing as if it were breathing. My head spun, the walls of the house warping and twisting around me. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet. The lights flickered violently, and a guttural voice filled the room. "You invited us in." The shadows on the walls coalesced into the hooded figure. This time, it wasn't alone. More figures emerged, their hollow blank faces turned toward me. The air was electric, vibrating with a malevolence that made my skin crawl. I held up the knife, my hands shaking. "Stay back," I shouted, though my voice felt small, swallowed by the oppressive darkness. The figures didn't stop. They closed in, surrounding me in a circle. Their presence was overwhelming, and the room felt impossibly small. Desperation took over. I turned back to the box and grabbed the photograph, tearing it to shreds. But the moment the pieces hit the floor, the shadows lunged. I screamed, slashing wildly with the knife. The blade passed through them as though they were made of smoke, but their touch was ice cold, seeping into my skin and bones. "It's too late," the voice repeated, echoing from everywhere and nowhere at once. I realized then that the box wasn't just a portal, it was a contract, an invitation for these entities to enter my life. Destroying it wouldn't save me. I had to break the connection. Summoning what little strength I had left, I grabbed the box and sprinted toward the door. The shadows clawed at me, pulling at my clothes and skin, but I didn't stop. I threw the door open and ran into the night, the cold air biting at my face. There was only one place to go, the pond behind my house, the one place I felt